Okay, we're ready to go. Those of you that can, if you could please rise as we're going to be starting off our gathering here with a grand entry. All right, here we go. Aitsi'poyiiks. Gentlemen, this is our grand entry here for the Aitsi'poyiiks Committee Symposium. Here at the multi-purpose, we have members from the Blood Tribe Chief and Council, the Gunny Chief and Council, as well Makiinima, and our elders with the Aitsi'poyiiks Committee. Thank you, Aitsi'poyiiks singers. We're going to call on them for two more songs. We're going to ask them for a flag song and then a honor song. So anytime that we gather, we make sure that we sing these songs. And so we're going to call on the Aitsi'poyiiks for the flag song. All right, here. Flag song, yeah. Here we go. Right on, thank you. All right, we're going to ask them for an honor song. Oh, that was the honor song. Okay, victory. Victory song. We're just following the how normal grand entries go. Here we go. Thank you. I'll name another song. Jokes. All right, if we could get everyone to have a seat, thank you so much. Let's give this wonderful group of people a big round of applause. Okay, we'll get right into it, and we'd like to thank the singers. Those songs we sing in a particular order, and there's reasons for it, and we sing the flag songs to honor all of our nations. We sing the victory songs to honor all of our successes throughout Indian country, and we have many veterans, and we want to honor them that way, and as well. We have many of our people that are doing really good things all throughout Indian country. So again, thank you, singers. All right, at this time, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call up Makiinima to come up to say some opening remarks. Let's give Makiinima a round of applause. I just noticed my Uncle Scooter walking in with a pretty big TV.
Piinotoyi. Niksoukoaukaak. Kenagaak Omahksapiipokaa. Kenagaak Aitsi'poyiiks. Hanagaak Aitsi'poyiiks. Hanagaak Aitsi'poyiiks. Kenagaak Aigaak Omahksapiipokaa. Omahksapiipokaa. Kitkonaak samatsem puan kaak. Aitsi'poyiiks. Se kastonatsi taami sispen khannakitan stukanaap. Moksi Aitsi'poyiiks ksiika kimatuumia. Makumanistaskunata pisse Omahksapiipokaa. Aksikaasta puvakkiautista piitsiissini. Han nohkaamuska skistoki kristikuis nohattukanuhpinnaan. Han muka sonomukanistaan iskatuhpa miikkeistuiksi. Han nimetset tukanuhpinnaan. Iksepessä taappi tukskaasni tääksem stop. Kelkeitä sopuja psksenis Aitsi'poyiiks. Nimanat semmattuhpian kaus niistäskei Niitsipowahsis nimatääkää juhtsiipaatsa. Aitsi'poyiiks. Hän neikskei kiistoan kitsetsen opispua. Kiteistä matsuuki pinnaan. Kitsitseni katuhpua muski skohtsik maanistapespi kaahsennooniks. Hannakaaki matuumaatapio. Muske kimuhtsiina käistä matsuuks pinnaan muske. Iksi ikitsaatakuan kiistonnuun nukanistsini piis skohtsik. Kaamutske se kannistiksemistan hankamannistuksesta pioki. Ahtuakkeista matsuutseni ahtumannista akki uudesta piitsisi Aitsi'poyiiksen ikaksukaampio. Hän ei nukannistutesta piitsis piskohtsek. Hän ikäistä muipiutsia. Ookitsi Aitsi'poyiiks annik meistä piskohtsaamus niistä skei. Ni tapakakkumaa. Kaahsennooniksi maanista siikitapiispia, maanista aakistuapspia, se tätseni kuukia. Kennäis siistä paatista piitsis mohkit Aitsi'poyiiks. Oukikia käätäpiopaa maatattei iikutesta piitsis paakit Aitsi'poyiiksen noin, niin taaksaa piippui. Our elders, our spiritual leaders, our youth, our educators, and of course, the Aitsi'poyiiks. I'm always glad to participate in these meetings. Over the past 2 days, we have also engaged in bringing people together from our confederacy, from Siksikai, Batksipikani, Skapipikani, Okikistunnon, no Kanna. Aitsi'poyiiksen ja musnitsuske, Aitsi'poyiiksesta piitsispi. You'll have to forgive me. Sometimes when I'm supposed to be speaking English, I revert back to Aitsi'poyiiksen. As one of our elders told us yesterday at the meeting, who gave accountings, talked about our history, talked about an important incident that happened many years ago. He wanted to speak entirely in our language. And so therefore he asked one of our knowledgeable speakers, Martin, to be his interpreter, so that he would not have to interpret what he had said in Aitsi'poyiiks, in Blackfoot. He said, when I do that, I lose that important thinking that is so much a part of our language. He didn't want to lose track of what he was wanting to share with us. So I think it's very important because we are told that the use of Aitsi'poyiiks, the use of our language is so powerful. It goes beyond the mere act of saying words. It expresses those thoughts that make us unique as the Aitsi'poyiiks, as members of the Blackfoot Confederacy. So I think that is something that we continue to try and use in the discussions that we have. You will hear more presentations today, and I'm looking forward to learning more of our words and the meaning of those words. At our gathering over the last 2 days at the Red Crow College at the Meat Gesto, I did share with you some knowledge that I had learned from some of our older, wiser people. And that was because our language has so much meaning. It is so powerful. One of our words, just one of our words, really cannot be interpreted or translated into one English word. We have to use many English words to then translate or interpret what that one word means. An example I tried to use yesterday was the word Aitsi'poyiiks. Aitsi'poyiiks. There is no real English word that we can use that would interpret what Aitsi'poyiiks means. As I am told by more knowledgeable people, Aitsi'poyiiks really came from when our warriors were getting ready for battle, when they were getting ready to go on raids, to go capture horses. Not steal them, but to capture horses. So older warriors, spiritual people, would be amongst them as they were getting ready. And they would be talking to them, encouraging them. Okay, Aitsi'poyiiks. So that was an encouragement, and I guess the closest words in the English language that kind of expresses what that one word means is embrace the coming battle. Embrace the skirmishes that you will have. Embrace them. Do not be fearful, because if you truly embrace them, then you will be victorious. So it's an encouragement that I think we still use today. When I first started in the work that I'm doing many years ago, I was so fortunate to be with older leaders. Natusapi, Binakwayam, all the older leaders. And of course, they taught me about what leadership is all about. One of the words that they used most often was Aitsi'poyiiks. We ran into some difficulties in dealing with outside forces, so we had to be brave. That was the message. Do not shirk from your responsibility. Accept it, deal with it, and we will win. So I've tried to use that thinking. Sometimes some of my older relatives would almost get mad at me if they felt that I was getting too scared to do important things. I wasn't really scared too much of the outside forces, other government representatives. I was a little more scared when our own people, made it hard to us to carry out our responsibilities. So I wanted to thank the Aitsi'poyiiks, of course, for the work that you've been doing. I want to thank all of you for being here today. And we have representation from Siksika. We have representation from Omahksapiipokaa. We have representation from Omahksapiipokaa, and of course ourselves. And of course we have our spiritual people with us today. We have our knowledgeable elders, our knowledge keepers. But I think we always have to remember that we are all Blackfoot speakers. Niitsipowahsin. Yes, some of our older people may be able to speak the language better, understand it better, understand the true meanings of some of our words. But the rest of us are here to learn more about our language. And I know a little bit of our language, and I want to encourage those of you who are seeking to know more about our language, who are seeking to engage in some of the activities that we will have today, to never, ever feel inferior. Pinasi to name usik. Do not feel inferior if you think that you do not know as much about language as others. We are all Blackfoot speakers, and again, I thank the organizers for making our gathering happen, and I am sure it is going to be very productive. Han.
Okay, thank you, Makiinima. At this time, I'd like to call Arnold Fox to come up to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Tony. I'm going to hijack the agenda just for a couple of minutes before I introduce our keynote speaker. I just would like to acknowledge the Blackfoot Confederacy for inviting the Aitsi'poyiiks committee to share in presenting and organizing today's activity. Today is actually the third day of the Blackfoot Confederacy gathering that started at Red Crow College next door these past 2 days. So we're just carrying it over into here. We expected a few more people, and we thought this might be a better venue for that. So I thank Blackfoot Confederacy, Genevieve, Roy, and all of the other nations. Just a quick introduction. I won't ask the Aitsi'poyiiks members to stand up, but we have Leroy and Harriet Heavy Runner sitting over here. We have Diana Plume and Pauline Whitegrass sitting at the next table. We have Agnes First Charger sitting over there. Oliver Russell is somewhere in the crowd. And of course, Martin Eaglechild, right over there. Okay. I think I'm forgetting one member, but may not be present, but my mistake. We also have administration reps on Aitsi'poyiiks committee. We have Bruce Ironshirt from FCSS. We have Gloria Wells from Ninastako, and JC from FCSS, and myself. We have a few other members, but they're not here. We're also in the process of we're not quite up to the maximum number of our committee members, so we're trying to organize a recruiting process that will invite more members on. The last thing I'll say about before I go into my introduction is during the 1980s, and I know I'm really dating myself when I share this story with you, I had the opportunity to move to Edmonton for 7 years and to work with the Alberta government during those 7 years. The early 80s or mid 80s, if you'll remember, the Edmonton Oilers won the Stanley Cup for 4 years out of that. And I think one subsequent year after I moved from Edmonton. My older brothers are much more sportsmen. They all played hockey. I did not play organized sports, but living in Edmonton during those years, you couldn't help but be caught up in the excitement of the Oilers. I switched my allegiance from the Toronto Maple Leafs to the Oilers once I saw Wayne Gretzky, not being a hockey player, but just as an ordinary spectator, you realized how good he was, how he skated around other players. So when my sister JC asked me, what do you want? What colors do you want? Pick out your own material. She offered to make my ribbon shirt. And without any design or purpose, we picked these colors. And I've had a few compliments saying, oh, I like your shirt. Those are the Oilers colors. So yes, I'll cheer for the Oilers. Thank you. And of course, tomorrow night is their next victory. So that'll be 3-3, and they'll go on to win it in wherever the other team is from. Okay, so earlier on this year in March, we were notified that the University of Alberta was sponsoring their second annual conference around Indigenous language revitalization. We went to the first one, a couple of us from Aitsi'poyiiks went to the first one last year. It was relatively small and not really big, but this year they organized it at the River Cree, and it was a much bigger program, a much very large interest from people across Canada. I think they had representatives from all of the provinces and the territories this year. When we got there, we didn't know well, we got an idea of the agenda before we left, and I noticed the name Aiyanna Twigg was on the agenda. And of course, my mind started, okay, I've never heard of that last name with other bands, maybe it's with us. Only to find out when we arrived there that our next speaker was indeed a member of the Blood Tribe. Her father is from here, Ghana, and her mother from Tunaksa, okay, from a tribe around Cranbrook, right, BC. So it was indeed an honor for me to go and introduce myself to Aiyanna. She was on a youth panel, and she also gave a presentation, her own presentation as part of the conference. So I started asking questions. I introduced myself and found out that her grandparents were Chris and Diane Twigg from here. And I'll let you introduce your mother. I believe you're with some family members. I was indeed struck by Aiyanna's commitment to not only learning her mother's language and helping to revitalize that language, but also her interest in researching her roots here on the Blood Reserve. Without further ado, I would like to call Aiyanna Twigg up here. Aiyanna. And I'm probably still mispronouncing her name, but I'll let her correct me. And I wonder if I could have one of the technicians come up and connect her.
Okay. Okay. Natanaku Aiyanna. Nog doet zetapi gana en tunacha. Gitoch genak tsimatsim ochpoa. I hope you were able to understand that. I just learned how to introduce myself in Blackfoot like 2 weeks ago, so I'm sorry if it was kind of bad. So as Arnold mentioned, I come from 2 different indigenous communities. I am Tunacha on my mother's side. Some of you might know us as Kootenai. And I'm also Blackfoot from Ghana on my father's side. So I'll also introduce myself in my mother's language. Gisok wishnam piniskish, who sokesh kokani go sawasaka na san mietki, who sokesh kokani go opchniskishni, hugaklik Aiyanna Twigg, hlak otsats nana, hu ini tunachat, wan magantik, hugakigachi, ekin kumslas no kliet. So I said, good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today, and I'm so happy to see all of you. My name is Aiyanna Twigg, and I am Tunacha and Blackfoot. I did not grow up here in the Blood Reserve, so I didn't grow up learning the Blackfoot language or culture. I grew up in my mother's territory in Tobacco Plains, and that's where I mostly learned my mother's language and our culture. But recently, I have been trying to reconnect with my Blackfoot family and our language and our culture. So I really thank you for inviting me here today. I am 23 years old. I'm not 16. I know I look very short. You can probably barely see me over this podium, but I'm 23 years old. I am an Indigenous youth activist, linguist, and researcher in my community and across Turtle Island. I have my Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of British Columbia with a double major in First Nations Endangered Languages and Anthropology. And I'm currently a master's student at the University of Victoria pursuing a Master's of Education in Indigenous Language Revitalization, which is about to start in about a week and a half, which I'm very excited about. I advocate for Indigenous issues, Indigenous rights, and language revitalization. This past year, I have been working with an organization called the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, where I have been supporting the United Nations International Decade for Indigenous Languages. And this decade is meant to bring awareness to Indigenous languages and the fact that our languages are becoming endangered and that we need to take action. So I have been meeting with government organizations, non-Indigenous organizations, and Indigenous organizations to mobilize the decade and start getting action and promotion from our governments, such as policy development and many other different things. I have been able to travel the world to advocate for our languages, such as in Paris, such as New York, Virginia, and across Canada. I would like to talk a little bit about my community just to better situate you in this presentation. So the Tunacha or Kootenai language is a language isolate, which means that it's not related to any other language in the world. And it has been deemed critically endangered by linguists because we only have approximately 30 fluent speakers of our language left. I've never really liked the term critically endangered because it promotes a negative connotation about our language and a sense of hopelessness. A lot of people don't see a point in researching or learning our language. But we actually have over 500 plus active language learners, which is amazing because that means we have over 500 people trying to learn our language and revitalize it. And a lot of the efforts by my community inspired me to become involved in language revitalization. Our traditional territory expands approximately 70,000 square kilometers, with territory in the southeastern interior of British Columbia, parts of Alberta, extending into the US in Montana, Idaho, and Washington. We have 6 Tunacha communities. We have 4 that are located in British Columbia, 2 that are located in the US, in Montana, and in Idaho. And we have always had a very small population of maybe about 2,000 people amongst our 6 communities. So we're a very small nation, and this is also what makes it difficult for us to revitalize our language because we simply lack the capacity to develop resources, and we also cannot get equitable funding from the government because they don't see a point in investing in our language. So I come from this community, Yakut Ak Nokliet, which is one of the smallest Tunacha communities. So this is basically an actual picture of our entire reserve. Like that's all it is. It's very small. We only have about 70 people, maybe a bit more today, who live on reserve. So we don't really have any language programming or cultural programming. We also don't have a school in our reserve. And we are also kind of in an isolated area, and we're about an hour drive from the nearest town. So the nearest town to us is Cranbrook, BC. So this also makes it difficult for kids to go to school. We are also located about 5 to 10 minutes away from the Canadian-US border. So if you cross the border, you're only about a 20-minute drive from the nearest town in Eureka, Montana. So this is actually where I went to school from grades kindergarten to grade 12. I would cross the border every single day to get to school, and I was able to do this through J Treaty. And this school that I went to school in, Eureka, Montana, it's a very small town, and it's also a very hick town. There's a lot of white people. There's very little diversity. And the only Indigenous students that attended this school was myself and my siblings and my cousins, so maybe about 7 of us. And we all experienced a lot of racism and discrimination because the people there, they didn't have very good relations with Indigenous people. And because of that, it brought on a lot of racist stereotypes. And so when you're a young child, about 9 years old, experiencing this from both teachers and students, the only thing that I could think to do to protect myself in this Western society was to hide my identity and hide my culture to fit in. And this is something that us as Indigenous people have to face, is we have to walk along 2 roads. One road is this road to fit in with this white Western society, and the other road is practicing our cultures and speaking our languages. And we are forced to choose between those 2 roads. So I chose to fit into the Western road because I thought that's what would protect me. But it didn't, because I was very much Indigenous and I wasn't going to be accepted by these people. And so throughout the next years of my life, I didn't learn the language or the culture, and then I experienced a lot of identity crisis and also mental health issues and struggles. But then it wasn't until I was in about 11th grade, 17 years old, that I reconnected with our language and our culture. And that's when I started to get a sense of clarity, and it changed my perspective. And that's when I learned that language is healing. Language is power. That's where I learned that our languages have the ability to heal our trauma. And that is where we are also able to change our perspective and how we understand the world, our identities, ourselves, the land, the plants, the animals, and our culture. So that's when I decided I wanted to pursue a career in language revitalization so that I could support my community, the youth in my community who are struggling, to heal their traumas with language and find empowerment in ourselves. And today, I'm happy to say that I'm Indigenous. I'm happy to be able to go to conferences across Canada and talk about my story and talk about language revitalization and the amazing efforts across all of our Indigenous nations. So I've been learning my Indigenous language, Tunaqa, for about 5.5 years. I started relearning when I was about 18, when I started university, and I actually taught myself the language through online and print resources. And I mainly learned through reading and writing, which isn't always the best way to learn because you don't really get that socialization aspect. It's hard to acquire a language without actually hearing it and also having conversations. And then I started this program called the Mentor Apprentice Program about 2 years ago with First Peoples Cultural Council. And through this program, you are meant to learn your language through one-on-one, through language immersion. And being in this program has really challenged what I know about my language, but also being able to converse in my language with a fluent speaker and also build a relationship with my fluent speaker, which is really important when we're speaking our languages. So I've completed 2 years in this program, and I've completed about 600 hours of language learning, and I still have about 300 more hours in this program, but it's been a really amazing process to be able to reclaim that part of my identity. So now that you know a little bit more about me, I wanted to ask this question: what is language revitalization? And the reason that I wanted to ask this question is because a lot of us, we know what this means. We work in this environment, in this category. But when we talk about language revitalization, we also have to acknowledge that language revitalization is going to look different amongst our different communities, amongst different Indigenous nations. And the reason for this is because as Indigenous people, we all come from different cultures and different languages. And because of that, we are going to have different approaches that respect the community's needs and values to language revitalization. So there is not a one-size-fits-all for language revitalization. If there was, our languages wouldn't be endangered. And I think it's important that we understand this, but what we can do is we can come together, like conferences like these, share best practices with one another about the things we are doing, and inspire one another. It's also important to talk about this because when we're talking about language revitalization in a provincial aspect across the globe, governments often try to make language revitalization fit in a box that can be clicked off by every single Indigenous community, but that's not the case. It's not a one-size-fits-all. But the reason that it's also important is because when we talk about language revitalization, we also have to ensure that we consider it within legislation, within the governments, within policy development, and within education, because we need support from the governments in terms of funding, in terms of policy development, advocating, and getting recognition that are as official languages, and we also need to ensure that it's represented through education, because this is how we transmit our languages. This is how our kids are going to learn our languages. But in order for it to be recognized within education, we have to ensure it's done in a community-driven and community-led way. But a broad definition of language revitalization is to increase the number of speakers in a community. While language reclamation goes beyond language revitalization, language reclamation is defined as a greater effort by a community to claim its right to speak their language and set associated goals in response to community needs. And the reason that I talk about language reclamation is because alongside language revitalization, which focuses on increasing the number of speakers, which is important in having thriving languages, we must also talk about language reclamation, because this is where we are going to claim our linguistic rights to our languages, as mentioned within legislation, policy development, and within education. But why is language revitalization important? I get asked this question a lot from youth and from non-Indigenous people. And I always tell them that there are an estimated 7,000 languages in the world. And despite Indigenous people making up only 6% of the world's population, they speak more than 4,000 of the world's languages. Among the 4,000 Indigenous languages, the majority of them are under threat of becoming and/or are already under threat of becoming endangered or sleeping. We need Indigenous languages to decolonize our world. We need them because with Indigenous languages comes Indigenous cultures. Indigenous languages make up the biggest linguistic diversity in the world and are connected to the world's largest biodiversity hotspots. What this means is our Indigenous languages, we know, are connected to the land, the plants, and the animals. As Indigenous people, we have been here for thousands of years, 10,000 plus years. And through those years, we have been able to observe the plants and the species around us. And we have learned how to protect them and preserve them for the future generations. And our languages are how we have transmitted that knowledge. Therefore, our languages are the blueprint in protecting the biodiversity, the plants, and the species around us. Our languages actually have the possibility of reversing climate change. But as our languages are becoming endangered, so too are the plants and the species around us. And this is why it's important that we revitalize our languages, because we are not only reclaiming our language, we are reclaiming our identity, the plants, and the animals around us. Indigenous languages and their cultures hold valuable knowledge about the world that Western knowledge and language can't even begin to comprehend. With that, Indigenous languages are a vehicle in sharing and expressing their knowledge, worldviews, and beliefs, which often provide a unique way of understanding the world. I often hear that people say we need to speak our languages, we need to revitalize them and maintain them. While all of those things are important, we also have to reawaken the spirit of our languages. Our languages also have a spirit, and when we speak them, we're also honoring that spirit. The spirit of our languages are interconnected to our culture, to our identity, to our land, our stories, and our history. We must awaken the spirit of our languages once again, and the only way to do this is by awakening the spirit within ourselves. And this can be done by connecting to our culture, our history, our ceremonial practices, our songs, our prayers. And by doing so, we learn about ourselves on a much deeper level than the physical world. We learn about the spiritual world and the energy that exists in the air that we cannot see. Our languages break normal boundaries that Western languages have put in place. What this means is that our languages are descriptive and animate languages, where we see everything as living, and we have the ability to understand far more than what we see through our languages. We can speak to our ancestors, our spirits, the land, and the air. We must not forget this about our languages and encourage our youth, our people, to learn through ceremonies, songs, and our history. In addition to learning our ceremonies, songs, prayers, and history, we also have to reclaim our lands. By reclaiming our land, we are also protecting our languages, our identities, and our cultures. For instance, how the Tunakha Nation protected a sacred place in our territory called Gatmuk from a ski resort being built. We fought against the government and this ski resort for 30 plus years, trying to protect this sacred area because it has a spiritual connection to us. And we also, as Indigenous people, as Tunakha people, have an obligation to steward and protect that area. We were able to protect Gatmuk as an Indigenous protected and conserved area, and today we are able to hold our ceremonies there, continue to speak our language and our cultural practices in this area. So this is an example of how reclaiming our lands is also integral to reclaiming our culture, our language, and our identity. So I am a linguist and researcher who has attended colonial institutions like UBC and soon UVic. As an Indigenous person, as Indigenous students and researchers, one of the many dilemmas that we are faced with is, how do we continue to research and attend such colonial institutions while also continuing to practice our cultural traditions? How do we not lose sight of our values? While attending UBC, I asked myself this question, and what I realized while attending such a colonial institution is that there are endless possibilities to make change, to be heard, and to educate. It's hard when you're an Indigenous student within these organizations, it's hard not to have imposter syndrome, to feel like you don't belong, to feel like you don't know enough or you don't have enough knowledge. But what I realized is that we do have enough knowledge, and that all of these programs and all of this Western knowledge was created not to fit our Indigenous knowledge. It was meant to ensure that we could not provide our own knowledge within these settings, within these programs, as a way to assimilate us. But then I also realized that we have to be within these institutions, working from the inside in order to make change. We have to become lawyers, doctors, researchers, students, professors, in order to make the change that we need to see in order for our languages and our cultures to be thriving. This is the only way they will listen to us, is through policy development within these systems and organizations. And within these organizations is where we can challenge the people, the leadership within, which I have done throughout my life. When I was at UBC, when I'm working with CC UNESCO, I'm constantly challenging people to rethink their thinking and to ask them these questions. Another way I'm also trying to do this is I'm trying to bridge the gap between linguistics and language revitalization. Linguistics is inherently colonial. It has been built around a westernized belief system, an ideology that does not encompass Indigenous languages. Linguistics was created to understand Indigenous languages through Western languages like English and their belief system. And because of this, a lot of Indigenous languages that have been researched through linguistics and anthropology, they have lost a lot of cultural meaning in their languages because they imposed their own belief system onto these languages and onto these cultures. But linguistics also has valuable knowledge in researching and understanding languages. And for a lot of Indigenous languages, we rely on the documentation that has already been done to reclaim our languages. And some of the skills that linguistics offers is understanding sound patterns in languages and grammar patterns, which are important in creating teaching and learning curriculums in our communities. So there are ways that we can utilize these programs and these systems of education to support our Indigenous languages. Which is why I'm going back for my master's degree at UVic, and I will be researching our current writing system because I want to decolonize our current writing system to fit our values as Tunaka people. Currently, there are only non-Indigenous linguists researching our language, and unfortunately, I have seen that they also continue to impose their own views onto our language because they do not have a deep understanding of our culture. I want to decolonize this way of thinking and create a standard spelling rules and writing curriculum for our language, something that will be useful to our community. In addition, that is also why I created this toolkit. So when I was working with the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, I also wanted to create a resource that could be useful to our Indigenous communities that could support language revitalization. And we started talking about documentation, my colleague and I. And we were saying that we need to do documentation in our communities. We need to be able to record our elders and fluent speakers because time is of essence in our communities. As elders are passing, fluent speakers are passing. We need to get that knowledge from them before it's too late. But currently, documentation is very hard. It requires an education in linguistics and anthropology, which takes years of schooling and years of experience. It's very technical and it's very dense. And because of this, it actually creates more barriers for our language. We have to be able to do this work ourselves. So I asked myself, how does somebody in their community document or record their grandmother speaking in the language or a fluent speaker speaking in the language? How do they actually start doing this? How do we make this easy and accessible? And that's where I decided to create this toolkit. So this toolkit is specifically designed for beginners who want to document their languages, record their languages, and be able to do it through a very simple and easy process. My toolkit that I created is called Safeguarding Your Language Through Documentation. It's not published yet. It'll probably be published at the end of this month, and it's currently being designed by an Indigenous graphic designer and illustrator. And I think the cover page looks amazing, and it really captured what I was trying to show. And what I was really trying to show is that our languages break boundaries. Our languages contain our ancestors. We're able to see things in the air and the energy that we're not able to usually see or say in English. And it also connects us across our many generations to our ancestors, our spirits, to the young ones and the future ones. So if you know a youth or if you are interested yourself in documenting your language, be on the lookout for this toolkit. It will be available online through the University of Alberta website, through CC UNESCO, through UBC, lots of different avenues. And one way that I am advocating for Indigenous language revitalization is through technology and media. Technology and media are an important component for the Indigenous languages today and into the future. And youth have an important role to play in that with the knowledge and skills that they hold if we encourage them. It also creates a relationship between youth and fluent speakers to work together. However, youth are not always taken seriously for their contributions to language revitalization because they are young and perhaps because technology and media have not always been perceived as important tools for language revitalization. But we must use any tools that exist to support language revitalization in our communities. As Indigenous people, we have always adapted to our environments to survive. And in our current society, we rely on technology and media, which dominate our society. Almost every single one of us probably owns a phone, has social media, and currently English is the most represented language online. We need to be able to represent our languages online, increase our visibility, but also get the youth engaged through these tools. Such as using different technology tools and softwares. For instance, I adapted one of our oral legend stories in Tunaka into an animation. I thought of this project entirely on my own. It was for a school project when I was in my 4th year of university. And I stood up in my class and I said, I want to animate a Tunaka oral story. And everybody kind of looked at me like, really? That's crazy. And to my surprise, I had the support of 2 classmates. And we were able to create this animation for my community. We had no funding for this project, and we also had no animation skills prior to this, but we still somehow managed to pull this project off. And the reason that I really wanted to create this project was because I wanted to show youth in my community that they can be a part of language revitalization in different ways. We can utilize these tools that exist to create these really amazing resources. So I'm going to share the animation with you. I hope it works.
I got these glasses to wear.
That's okay.
They don't.
I wonder if this would work.
Yeah.
Sorry, this one. Sik amashni qotat. Qnashu is tawtsikhus. Kukin miet. Wanoyit namus. Nopni nes mak shatish nituk shik natich nakis. Gauhachi tawitsikhu. Kakeni. Kahaka gikish. Khmakin hisab. Hunisish. Nuwas khnati inpum. Aukliit. Nikint. Monoyit namu. Kakshapti kotzat.
Waha selwani kitni nes klatlu ku iknasha
Takas sa anahami tawitsikhu akat awaskani sa kanunas hushpashni kotzat kakiksi
na aksukut masel isil oyalli itni aki tawatsikhu khma hakapsi nituklikna tikhna titmo mal aknit la is Chen maksakil suk nikitsit kan kikka aksukuts hununilni kakahmak nuplapni kusakil nitkauhanet ikil san athusakil itkilni tchalin ku wanuyit namo
tawitsikhu sa tinakan wiskani ashnukni. Yeah, so that was, whoa, sorry. That was our animation that we somehow managed to pull off in 4 weeks. I would literally stay up till 3 a.m. like several nights watching YouTube videos, trying to figure out how to use the software on top of being in 5 classes, a full course load, and also working part-time. But I somehow managed it, and the reason that I worked so hard to make this animation was because I saw the importance of it in my community, and now we have this resource for the children, and it also empowers the youth in my community to also become involved through really cool different projects like this. But it wasn't always easy. We had a lot of issues that we experienced, as you can see. It was very frustrating, but we continued to persevere. And this is another photo of the animation from the inside. So there was a lot of coding, a lot of layering, a lot of different technical things that I had to figure out. But once I figured it out, it was very easy. And now I have the skills to be able to do this. I also believe that social media is a great tool to advocate for language revitalization because it creates accessibility for people to learn. That is why I created my Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok accounts called @DunachaPride, because I wanted to connect with other youth in my community to encourage them to learn our language. I thought that by using social media, it would connect with them in a way that they would feel comfortable and create a safe space for youth and others in my community to start learning. because for many, this can be an intimidating first step when they're trying to reconnect with their languages and their cultures. The type of content I create includes sharing fun videos such as place names, greetings, common phrases, and more. I'm also a language learner myself, and I wanted to show people that if you make mistakes, it's not that big of a deal because it's all a part of the learning process. I would say that my social media accounts have been successful in advocating for language revitalization because it has encouraged many people in my community and Indigenous people around the world to start learning because they feel inspired and connected to do so. My page has also become a place for non-Indigenous people to learn how they can support language revitalization and be an ally. So some of the type of videos that I post, I'm going to share with you.
Go and get quiet.
Waha.
Waha. Go in kakanal cat.
Waha.
Waha. Go in get the sister.
Waha.
Go in Agmakan.
Waha.
Waha.
Go in Awisho.
Hey.
So in this video, I wanted to share with people that connecting with your elders is important when you're learning and that they also want to have fun. So I adapted the headbands game into our language and I started playing it with the elders in my community and they really enjoyed it. So there are really fun ways that we can also learn our languages. I move over to Aitsi'poyiiks, which is Fernie. Then we have Guk Aminukshiit, Elkford. And this was a video that I shared going over our Tunaqa place names, and I was sharing names of popular towns and cities in British Columbia so that people who live there can learn our place names. And it was actually very useful because a lot of people started having an interest in our language, learning about our community, and the place names and territory that they are on. So these are different ways that we can inspire youth, but also teach non-Indigenous people about our languages and our cultures. I also try to post really relatable content for youth to feel connected with and make them laugh. So this is also another video. So I just thought that was a funny TikTok meme that was happening, and I thought it was funny because I think it's so relatable that when you're trying to learn and your mentor can just keep saying the same phrase and it just is not sticking. And it was really funny because I had a lot of people message me and be like, this is so relatable, like I feel this. So, yeah. Kapsin. Oh my god. Okay. Kapsin gin skashik in mig.
Gubson gin skakel.
Skashik in mig.
Skakel gin meg.
Yeah.
Gubson gin skakel gin meg.
Skashik. It's skashik in mig.
Skakel
In mig.
in meg. Gubson gin skakel.
Skashik in mig.
Skakel gin meg.
Skashik in mig.
Skakel gin meg. Gubson gin skakel. Skakel. Shake. Is it skak? Oh my god.
So that's one of my favorite videos because it really represents the process of learning a language and that sometimes we get tongue twisters, we get stuck on a word, but that's okay. It's all a part of the process and you have to have fun and you have to laugh during those moments. So I really wanted to represent this to people online to show them that learning a language is not linear. You're going to go through ups and downs and it's not going to be simple. And the last video I wanted to share was this video I was interviewing two mentors, and I was asking them questions like, how do you feel about youth learning our language, even non-Indigenous people learning our language? Because oftentimes, youth feel very intimidated when they're learning their languages. And this is because they often feel like they might not know enough, they're scared to make mistakes, and they're scared that they're gonna get yelled at. But the reality is, our elders are there to support us. They want us to learn, and they want to encourage us. And a lot of times they are there with open arms and a kind heart. And I wanted to show youth in my community that they should not be afraid to speak our language, and that they should actually be encouraged to do so.
Hoots akukini, goots hitscha, tunacha, akininku, tachas.
And these were some of these are some of the comments I have received on Instagram. So when I first created my social media pages, I wasn't sure if I was actually making an impact, if it was actually positive, if it was doing anything. And I received this comment from somebody who said that watching my videos actually helped them learn the sounds of our language. And one of the main reasons I created my Instagram page was to connect with urban Indigenous youth and those who don't live in our community. For those who don't live in our community, how do they access materials? How do they learn our languages? They also deserve to learn and to be a part of our communities and reclaim their identities. And so being able to see this comment and knowing that my videos are actually making a positive impact and helping people was really heartwarming to see. So this person actually lives in Calgary, and they were able to learn our language and the sounds of our language through my videos. So these are possibilities that social media can do for language revitalization. And then I also received this comment from somebody. They said, being away from home right now, I love being able to have access to Tunaqa-based content, like social media pages on Instagram, but also being able to access community groups like on Facebook. So as our youth are attending higher education, as they're leaving our communities, perhaps for a better life, they also like to still have a community and have connection to our communities. And by having Facebook groups, social media pages, it creates that opportunity for them to feel connected, to still feel inspired and encouraged to learn. I know that when I was in university, being able to connect to Facebook groups, connect with people online, was how that encouraged me to continue learning my language. And lastly, I wanted to share this. This is why we do the work that we do. This is why we work in language revitalization and why I decided to work in language revitalization for our future generations. So that the work our ancestors and those before me did would not be forgotten. So that no matter how hard they try to take our languages away and our cultures, we can say that we are still here and that we are still speaking our languages. When I first created my Instagram page, I wanted to create a space for youth to feel empowered to speak our languages. I wanted to be a role model for them and be that person I wished was around when I was a child. Using social media and advocating for our languages is not easy work. It's exhausting, it's tiring, and it's emotional. There have been many times I wanted to quit the work that I'm doing because it's hard. And it's long, and sometimes I feel alone. But I received this message a while ago from someone in my community. They were talking about their granddaughter who is only 8 years old, and she writes, "Our beautiful, lovely, gorgeous granddaughter loves listening to you speak Tunaqa. She's so proud of you and said that she's going to be just like you." This was truly an emotional moment for me because I knew that all of the work that I have been doing had finally paid off, that I was making a positive impact for our youth and our young ones, that maybe healing is beginning in our communities, and that there is so much hope for our culture and for our future. Our young ones are watching. They need role models, and they need empowerment, pride, and courage to learn our languages. This is why I do this work, and I'm sure this is why we all do this work. My hope for my language is that kids in the future will not feel shame for being Indigenous, that they will not feel discouraged to speak their languages, but rather encouraged by everyone to speak their languages. And my hope is that they will be in a safe space to learn and speak, and I hope that my future grandchildren will be correcting me in the language one day. And once that happens, I know that my work is officially done. So with that, I will say, Atu wishkatsiti kutska tunacha, which means I am proud to speak Tunacha. And I also hope to speak Blackfoot someday. So thank you all so much for listening to my presentation. Hosoka kokni.
Okay, beautiful. We just wanted to make a quick presentation. I'll give the mic to Arnold here.
Okay, just a quick reaction to Aiyanna's presentation this morning. Thank you very much. Very heartwarming story, part of your journey in learning your language, and I'm glad to hear your next area you'll tackle is the Blackfoot language. A very small token of our appreciation for you coming to join us today. This is a pair of moccasins that was made by one of our local members. I'd like to give these to you on behalf of the Blood Tribe, Ghana. Yeah, thank you. I hope they fit, so we can. Okay. Great.
Thank you so much.
Okay. I was also asked, do you have a Blackfoot name yet? I don't. Okay, there might be something happening later on, maybe during lunch. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you. Another round of applause. So, one of the things I think is when somebody's introducing themselves, especially if they're from the Confederacy, one of the things that I asked them, do you have a Blackfoot name? And sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. And when they say no, I just go to the elders and I'll ask the individual if they're okay with us gifting them a name. It's important that all of us in the Confederacy have names. And so we've been doing that lately. When we meet people, we've been asking them. We've been honoring them with names. So what I learned this morning is, and it makes a lot of sense, was I went to one elder, and the elders said it's best to ask somebody within that clan, within that family, to gift those individuals with names. And sometimes I think that's a good lesson for all of us to be able to know that it's important for us to carry those family names and that it comes from that clan, from that family. So we searched around and I found some relatives here. And so these are your relatives here. You have a lot more relatives in here. And these two individuals, I wanted to, Sterling and Newton, I need you guys to go back to your drum. We're going to do something right after this. And so Sterling is one individual that has been going on social media too, that has been spreading the good message of our language as well. Every Thursday at the Galt Museum, Julius Delaney has been having classes in the city of Lethbridge. And so lots of people have been going there. But I don't want to say too much. I just want to leave it at that. But I wanted to share that with all of you. And so I want to ask Herman and Julius to take over at this point.
Okay, daamiksi kanautuus. Istuako kapitaessa saksunommikä. Okay, mono kiinnoksissikoi. Hudenska simsi Twigg. Sitä peskaa siipinnoina mua. Tumoniskanna. Nomahtuut sitä piinistua. Sahtikin annistavaka. Matsoomahkataajo. Watapiinjikaasim James Twigg. Naachsa matskamusaaki Ada. Nei on amak. Watsomakatayoaka. Watatapiskaatsipen nidita piksu kama kio. Namachtuutitapi pino kaamak matsomakatayoaka. Istqanaamaksem naachsa kaniksi Twigs. Ispaniskatayoakse. Kimiksi omahpapiimiksi kaniksi ki Jim Twigg, Albert Twigg, mutabaatsinjikata. Kena Doc, Eugene, nanakaanista. Kiniksi naachsen naniksa. Go kinixisten naniksi Margaret Heinbol. Kena nach Chris Twigg uxist Margaret Heinbol. Whatsi Iitumipokaa ma Chris Twigg kima na nixisten na Margaret kitipokaapi mi Morris Heinbol. Kimiksi nimukpapiimiksi Jack Dewey and nixko kimiksi Margaret. Watohpokaapi mi Morris. Kinita piksu ma ki Chris aga samaskino Chris ngamo Kama kaksme kinbe tunniwa. Kinbe tukuya ma Chris. Kimonets samakata mo ni skana Herman. Na tu tsisene haksin jikatsiwa anoksis tikuike. Kinaka betsine ko ma akiwa. Anis ditapu tsitsu uksi ko ma akiwa. Han Herman.
There's no action taking Niitsipowahsin. Omahksapiipokaa Keynote. Nigaikake nihkata ahkiapuht. Nigaiksimahkakia nagohkain nihkataxaaksi. Kukusinnooniksi, kissukusinnooniksi. Nahanuhtaaksim stamo. Miuhtu tapitapihpa saa tohts hanniksi ko toneeko. Siskohtaka kaahsennooniksi kennikseen matsiktomuutsiimia. Tässä on aakseskini maatsai. Ammohknaapi puhsin piajuhkiitsio. Kistonnoon kitsipuhsin nuhattohkiits. Hakan jopa muu. Kitsiktomuutsiiminnoon. Maatsinkin kitsipamuhka enemy. Nida puka pahtakomuhka enemy. Häkkämmutsi epuajemmutsi op. Kennean stapamuhka napi puhsin. Kennean stapi enemy. Kistonnoon kitsiktomuutsiiminnoon. Hakan jopa challengers. That doesn't mean we hate them. There were our challengers in the past. Ihtäktomuutsi ma aamuksi chahku. Kenno kitauhsinnoon kistonnoon siksi kaitsitapi. Matajaksi takiopnoh kiitsemmiksaaki mahkäppissau. Kenne ihtäktomuutsi ma. Ki asukaan ja miima saa tohts. Ja mok saa tohtseka itaptakomuhka. We space ourselves in between each other. Isaattuutsi on kannakaki iskohtak. Okei kitakohtsen ihkata mstoa kiikoan. Essohtski tohtoava essohtski agatskitsena bassi kistonnoon no. Aitsi'poyiiks Niitsipowahsin. Anneni tokissi semmakaki msto kiikoan. No goodness. Stand right there. Yeah, just face. Hayo napi natos. Hai kipitaki. Hoki kaki msto kiikoan nohkaki. Aaku taki niin hikaassin. Hoki kakohtaaksi kootaukaa kienniksukaapi niin päätäpiissä. Ki tohtoaukaa kiennik maanistok uksisi tomuaksaakin annoksi otsihkaa. Aio ka kissorti ka ki ka ko emma anni ka ki utukaksin ka ki anni ka ki atsimu ihkani ka kokits pia passio ka ki anni ka ki utopissani ka ki udago ko emmo ka ki oki ka ki oki annoh ka ki amsto a ki Kähkitä päätä panipua. Kähkitä hohkoa maua annikaki. Utu kaksisi niin päätä piissnikaki. Amo kaki kähkitä päätä panipua. Amo kaki saattaki. Oikein la. Äkitsitseni katsomaan nuhtanisteni katsomaan.
And it sucks in it, woman from the other side of the mountains. More than you.